Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into what it actually takes to build true mental resilience. We're going to explore some really fascinating psychology around how we handle hardship, how our social needs are literally wired into us, and the actual mechanics of success. Have you ever wondered why some people absolutely shatter under pressure, while others seem to use that exact same pressure to forge themselves into something stronger? Well, let's find out. Now, I want you to consider this question for a second. What do a marshmallow, a lonely genius, and life's brutal truths all have in common? I know, it totally sounds like the setup to a weird joke, but believe it or not, these seemingly unrelated concepts actually form the very foundation of an unbreakable psychological toolkit. We're talking about discipline, self-awareness, and radical acceptance. To make sense of all this, we're going to build a mental architecture roadmap together. We'll start at the bottom with the foundation, brutal truths. Then we'll move up to the first floor, self-awareness. Next is the second floor, discipline, followed by the third floor, perspective. And finally, we'll cap the whole thing off with the roof, maintenance. All right, let's start from the ground up. Part 1, foundation, accepting reality. Look, before we can build up, we have to accept reality exactly as it is, no matter how uncomfortable that might be. And there's this incredible anecdote that perfectly captures this first brutal truth. Imagine a young man who spent years just waiting for the perfect opportunity. He waited for someone to discover his talent, for that one lucky break, for his friends to finally support him. 10 whole years passed and absolutely nothing changed. Then, one day, he met an old carpenter repairing a broken bridge and asked him, "How did you become so successful?" The carpenter didn't even look up. He just smiled and said, "I stopped waiting." When the confused young man asked what he was waiting for, the carpenter simply replied, "For someone else to build my bridge." So the absolute crucial takeaway here is this: nobody is coming to save you. Life doesn't hand out rescues. The very day you stop waiting for someone else is the day your life actually begins. Once you wrap your head around that, we've got a few more hard realities to face. First off, comfort. It completely destroys potential. Think of it like a blacksmith striking steel to forge out its weaknesses. You need the fire. Second, life is just not fair. If two seeds fall and one lands in rich soil while the other lands on rocks, the strongest ones don't sit around asking, "Why me?" They ask, "What now?" Third, failure is literally just the entrance fee to greatness. You have to pay it. And finally, time is our most limited asset. We all get exactly 86,400 seconds a day, and whatever you don't use simply vanishes at midnight. Okay, foundation poured. Let's move up to part 2. First floor, self-awareness. When we take a close look at our social wiring, we run into a genuinely fascinating paradox published in the British Journal of Psychology. For most people, happiness perfectly aligns with what's called the Savannah theory. Basically, this is the idea that frequent interaction with our social groups brings us joy, which is just a leftover evolutionary survival trait from our ancestors out on the African savannah. But for highly intelligent individuals, the data shows the exact opposite. For them, more social contact actually predicted lower life satisfaction. Crazy, right? Well, it's because their brains are highly wired to solve complex, abstract problems. For these folks, low-stakes social rituals like small talk or office gossip can feel like massive distractions from deeply meaningful long-term goals. They aren't trying to avoid people, they just prioritize depth over breadth. And that brings us to what researchers call cognitive asymmetry. You see, loneliness here isn't about being physically rejected by the group. It's really about how you process the world. Neuroimaging studies have actually shown that lonely individuals often process social information entirely differently than their peers. For highly analytical thinkers, simply finding mental peers is a massive statistical challenge. So, to fit in, they often engage in social camouflaging. They suppress their natural curiosity just to match the vibe of casual small talk. Over time, doing this masking effect becomes completely exhausting and leads to existential isolation, this profound, heavy feeling that your true internal world is totally inaccessible to anyone else. Let's keep climbing. Part 3. Second floor. Discipline. 210. That is the exact number of points by which children who could delay gratification outscored their peers on the SATs. This data comes straight from Stanford psychologist Walter Mischel's super famous 1960s marshmallow test. You might have heard of it. Kids were offered 1 marshmallow immediately or 2 if they could just wait 15 minutes. Only about 30% actually waited. But here's the wild part. Years later, those patient kids didn't just have SAT scores that were 210 points higher. They were actually healthier, they had better social skills, and fMRI scans later in life showed they literally had more active prefrontal cortices. That's the part of the brain controlling problem solving and impulse control. But you kind of have to wonder, is this just an inherent trait you're born with? Well, a 2012 Rochester University study added a brilliant twist. Before the marshmallow test, researchers gave kids crayons. One group of researchers promised a much bigger set of crayons that the kids weighted, but then intentionally broke their promise, creating an unreliable environment. The other group kept their promise. The results here were absolutely staggering. Look at this. The kids dealing with unreliable researchers waited an average of only 3 minutes before eating the marshmallow. But the kids with reliable researchers, they held out for an average of 12 minutes. So delayed gratification isn't just predetermined. It is a learned skill that is heavily influenced by the reliability of our environment and past experiences. So what is the practical takeaway for us here? Because our brains are completely hardwired to seek instant gratification, you actually have to actively train your brain. One highly effective hack is to pair an instantly pleasurable activity directly with a long-term goal. Think about it like this. Playing a sport with your friends gives you the instant gratification of socializing and having fun, while simultaneously delivering the delayed gratification of long-term physical health. By linking these activities together, you essentially trick your brain into enjoying the discipline. Moving right along to part 4, third floor perspective. This is where we look at the groundbreaking work of psychologist Carol Dweck on how we view our own potential. Dweck found that people generally operate with one of two mindsets. In a fixed mindset, you basically believe your qualities are carved in stone. If you have to put in effort, it means you just aren't naturally smart. Even more dangerously, failure is transformed from a simple action, like I failed at this, into your actual identity. I am a failure. But in a growth mindset, you know that effort is exactly what makes you smart. A setback isn't an attack on your identity, it's literally just a wake-up call to apply new strategies. Folks with a growth mindset don't just seek out challenges, they absolutely thrive on them, because they know that even history's greatest geniuses relied on tremendous grinding effort. If you want to see the pure power of that mindset in action, just look at Marva Collins. She was this phenomenal teacher who took inner-city Chicago kids who had been completely written off and labeled learning disabled or retarded by the school system. Instead of giving them dumbed-down material, she treated them like absolute geniuses. On day 1, she told them, "Goodbye to failure, children. Welcome to success." And through sheer passion, relentless effort, and an absolute refusal to let them quit, those exact same kids were soon reading Shakespeare, Aesop, and Tolstoy. She proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that test scores only tell you where a student is right now, never where they could end up. Finally, we've reached the top. Part 5, the roof maintenance. Now, a beautiful house is absolutely no good if the roof leaks, right? This roof represents the daily, active maintenance required to protect your mental architecture from the inevitable storms of stress and anxiety. According to a fantastic piece by clinical psychologist Alice Boyes on Lifehacker, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, provides the exact tools we need to rewire our daily thoughts. It's called cognitive restructuring, and it's literally one of the most effective psychological treatments out there. Let's quickly walk through this process together, step by step. Step 1, notice the distortion. Catch yourself making a baseless negative prediction. Step 2, track the accuracy. Actually write down how much time you spend stressing about it and note if that stressing led to a real solution. Spoiler alert, it rarely does. Step 3, behaviorally test the thought. For example, if you're convinced you don't have time for breaks, test working with and without breaks and then compare your productivity. And finally, step 4, evaluate the objective evidence for and against your negative thoughts, like a scientist would. To really seal up that roof, you need 2 final tools: mindfulness meditation and self-compassion. Now, mindfulness isn't just about zoning out and relaxing. It's actively training your brain to notice when you've gotten lost in a negative thought loop without judging yourself for it. And self-compassion is absolutely crucial. Instead of calling yourself a stupid idiot when you make a mistake, acknowledge that mistakes are a universal human experience. Actually, replacing self-criticism with self-compassion physically changes the structure of your thoughts over time. So we've built the foundation, the floors, and a solid roof. But a building only stands if you actively maintain it. So I want to leave you with a provocative final thought for today. If your daily habits never changed, where would your life be 5 years from now? Nobody becomes successful or unhealthy overnight. Your life is basically a bucket, and every single day your habits are a drop of water. Take responsibility for your mental architecture starting today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.